Nothing like a little bit of Webern to start.
I didn't see you.
Hello, everybody.
There you are.
Oh, there I am. There I am in Tahiti. It's so much fun. I was zooming with someone else today, and we were comparing our backgrounds. It was fun. He was going to Hawaii, so I had to go up one level. Okay. How are you all doing?
Great.
Good. How are you, Anna? Hey, Richard.
Hi.
Hi. This is fun. This is fun. Yeah, I'm doing these Zoom meetings with my orchestra every Sunday as well. Different materials, of course, and everything. But it's just we did a feature which I got that idea from some other orchestras, having them all bring their pets in to show their pets. And so, my God, when you have a whole youth orchestra, you get some amazing pets. Like, I didn't expect to see a hedgehog, but that's what I got to see. It's really fun, a lot of fun. I'm not going to ask you guys to do stupid pet tricks, so. All righty. So everyone just coming on board. And I just want to ask you before we begin, are any of you having trouble logging into the meetings?
No.
No? Some people
There's
said they...
Russell right there, folks. That's the famous Russell Steinberg.
This is Zoom, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Zoom.
Oh.
Zoom, yeah.
Zoom.
We're all one extended family now.
Exactly.
Hi, Mark. How you doing?
It's
great to see you.
I'm great.
Yeah, wonderful.
Full screen.
Wonderful.
That's here.
Okay, so what we're gonna do, I'm glad that most of you are getting on okay. Some people, I got a lot of emails from people who've had difficulty, and there's a lot of reasons for that. That can be anything from the, from my end, because the meeting ID can be changed or something with their equipment. Priscilla, I see you, or I don't see you, but I see your name. Are you able to hear me?
Oh, there's a chip.
There's
a chip here.
Just make sure that everyone is, get to participants, make sure
There are
everyone.
a lot of names. With everybody.
Yeah, let me just see Priscilla. Okay, Priscilla, I don't see your audio at all. Just okay, just gonna check all that.
I don't. I mean, there are a lot of names down here, but no one is.
Oh, well, they didn't show their face.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay if people don't want to show their faces. I just want to make sure they can hear and talk if they would like to talk. That's great. All righty. Okay, well, we're almost there. Hey, Noam, nice to see you again.
Hi, I of course forgot that we have a 3-hour time difference, so I tried to log in after my event was over, and it was still like 3 hours to go. So
I know what you mean. Someone sent me an email saying, you're incorrect. This is not Pacific Standard Time. This is Pacific Daylight Time. So I'm being educated in all of these different things as well.
No, I just made a much simpler error of forgetting a 3-hour time difference, but you're right, it's PDT.
Yeah, okay, so I learned I can just call it PT and be done with it. Okay. So let's see. Okay, well, people are coming in. Okay, that's good. So what I'm going to do today is a little bit different than what we did the last two times. I'm going to begin. We had a general topic, and what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to build a kind of template, or try to build a vocabulary that we can talk about listening. So this isn't completely an experiment. I've done this with many students before, but I haven't done it with just general listening. You know what I'm going to do? I'm hearing a lot of noise, so I'm going to mute everyone for a second. So just so that, yeah, I'm seeing everyone go, yes, please. Okay, so now that's easier. You can just hear me, and it's very quiet here right now. So we're going to build, I'm going to show you some of the ways I talk to people at the beginning about how we can start talking about music without being too, without having to have too technical vocabulary or anything, but just some of the basic ideas. And we're going to talk about 4 dimensions of music, what I'm calling 4 dimensions. 1, the acoustic dimensions. 2, what we call the musical dimensions, 3, the formal things, which is how music's put together. And then finally, I'm adding a 4th one I haven't talked about before because it's so important. And it was inspired in part by our talk last week about favorite moments, in which I'm just going to call emotional dimensions. And the point of this is I'm going to present this to you, describe it a little bit, and then I would love you to comment on it, shoot holes in it, tell me this is ridiculous and that I'm missing bigger points and things like that, or to say it's helpful. Either way, I think it would be, it's kind of an interesting thing, because if you see what I'm trying to do with these classical hangouts, I'm trying to kind of build not so much a vocabulary, but a style for which we can start talking about music, because we all come from such different backgrounds. I have some very skilled composers here, and I have some very skilled listeners, but I also have listeners who are, you know, people, not beginning, but people who are still looking to, Rick, it's so funny. Rick's sharing the screen. So glad you made it in, Rick. So we're going to go with that. And then of course I'll be done like in a half hour, and then I'll open it, and then we can have a discussion about all this. So I thought it would be fun to start with a little bit of humor. And so I'm going to play you a 2-minute excerpt from someone I think most of you know. None of my students knew it, but that's Victor Borgia, who predates me. But this was a cute, this was a cute thing he did on the Dean Martin show. And so this is just a nice way to introduce what we're going to be talking about.
Don't you like good music? Why do you interrupt me all the Transposing.
I love this part. Oops, let me get through. Yeah, so, okay, 1 second. Yeah. Was that fun?
Yeah.
Do you all know that? Or is that kind of new for a lot of you?
Seen it, right?
I've seen it. I think I've seen it.
Way before my time. But,
I've seen the beginning of it, not the rest.
yeah. You know, what I,
Yeah.
yeah, so if you
Hi.
comment, any of you. Victor Borgia is amazing. But, oh my God, that's really, that's great, bud. That's amazing. You know, that's what's so funny about having a wide circle of people here, is everyone has so much amazing experience on it. What I love about, my favorite part about that is when he can't hit the high note, so he moves the piano, you know, moves it to the right to be able to hit the high note. And I just love that we all understand that just like the opening joke at the beginning when he's playing the Lone Ranger theme, right, the Rossini theme, inverted, and then he turns the music upside down or right side up and then plays it. And we have an intuitive understanding, right, from all of those things. And it actually takes a lot of sophisticated understanding. You have to understand about register, about high and low. You need to understand about inversion, at least in some kind of, in some kind of way of interpreting, even if you're not the jargon for it.
Oh.
And that's what makes it so much fun. Sorry, say one time. Yeah, are any of you guys PDQ Bach fans?
I've heard him.
Because my students don't know anything about PDQ Bach, and it makes me so sad because I grew up with that humor. It was so wonderful, and I always use the New Horizons for music appreciation as my go-to to talk about music. How many of you know the New Horizons for music appreciation, PDQ Bach? A couple of you? I will play that next time. That's the gold standard for me for musical humor, where he turns the Beethoven Fifth Symphony into a sporting event, which is of course just what it always should be. So I'm going to mute you guys now, and you'll all be back later. So what I wanted to talk about now is my idea of these 4 dimensions of listening. And then you'll be free to share anything you want, any music you want. And so let me just get the first dimension I want to talk about is this one, what I call the acoustic elements. And these are the elements that we hear in all sound, regardless of whether they're musical sound or not. And I've put them in the order, at least to me, this is the order I think that in which we notice them and hear them. In other words, dynamics, the loud and softness of music is one of the first things we notice, whether sound is loud or not. And since we're all in social isolation, if any of you are in social isolation with a family or people, I'm sure dynamics play a huge role in your life, such as the music's on too loud or the TV's on too loud or something else is too loud. Dynamics are something they're very, very important. And of course, in classical music we love, the dynamics are constantly in variation. The next thing I think we notice is register. And the register, that was the thing that Victor Borgia was playing with, whether sounds are low or high. Then after that, for me, is articulation. And articulation has to do with the attack of notes. Is the attack accented? Is it long? Is it short? And then finally, the color of the sound. Do we hear something as, how do we describe the color? Color can be anything from violin to oboe, or to noticing it's a rock band, to a kitchen blender, to an orchestra. The sound color. And we've talked about how overtones and noise influence our awareness of color, but it seems like this is something that can apply to any sound. And why is this useful to me, at least? I'll tell you why. Is that when I teach composition to people who are, I've been teaching a lot in secondary school before, and so I would be teaching composition to people who didn't have a lot of technical ability in notation. And so the first assignment I always give them is I say, I'd like you to notate 1 full minute of sound in your household. And you have to put the time that you're listening to it on, and then you have to create your own notation. How would you create a score so that someone looking at that score could imagine what you were hearing? And then that leads to a discussion like, what do you hear? And at first people say, well, what, I wouldn't hear anything. And then of course, you start to become aware of all the stuff you're unconscious of, everything from air conditioners, to, well, in the past, telephones, well, I guess even now telephones, to kitchen noises, utensils, conversation and everything, and then graph that out. So what's the point of this exercise is to try to bring you to a wider listening, music listening, because there's kind of 2 ways as music listeners, it seems to me, we can approach getting to know music. One is just to keep getting to know more and more music. Just like when you're, you know, when I was a kid, there was only 3 foods I would eat when I was younger. And then gradually my palate got wider and wider and wider. And as I told you, I think I joked with you one time when I finally hit sushi, you know, I realized I was able to eat all kinds of things once I could eat raw fish. And so, and then I started to have all kinds of awareness and discriminating taste. The same goes with music. We fall in love with a particular composer, a particular recording. Gradually we build it and we build it out. Now, you know, and then sometimes we hit roadblocks, like Michael Morrison can't get into Bruckner, okay? But we all have something like that where we can't go, but gradually it kind of forms what our taste is. But there's another way of going about it, which is to try to build a vocabulary of how we can talk about music. And instead of bringing ourselves into it, like I was suggesting in our first talk about not saying I like it or I don't like it, trying to say, how is it put together? How is it wrought? And so this is a kind of very basic way of talking about dynamics, register, articulation, timbre. And one way of approaching this is to take a piece of music that we might not be familiar with. So I'm going to play you a piece you may or may not be familiar with. It's a beautiful piece of music. Let me see if I can get to this. Yeah, let's see. Let's listen to a little bit of this. And I want you to listen to it in regards to dynamics, register, articulation, and timbre. Not about whether you like it or don't like it, or even if you know what it is, but just in these terms. And then I'll turn you guys on and let me hear what you think. Good. All right. So that's a Balinese monkey dance. I'm going to unmute all of you. And how many of you know that piece by any chance? Yeah.
I do.
Sure. Great. So I'd like to just hear from you in terms of what were the dynamics that you noticed in the piece.
It was almost like it was a terraced dynamics. You'd have some loud parts and some softer parts, but it didn't seem like there was a lot of, you know, crescendos or a lot of different gradations of the dynamics. At least it didn't seem that way. I mean, there may have been, but for the most part, there was this sort of ostinato below, which was very at one level, and then sometimes it would get louder, and then there was something above that. But it seemed to me like more terraced. Okay, terraced. Did you notice that there were different components at the same time that had different dynamics? In other words, that's one way to start noticing things that, for instance, this is not me. I'd like to let me hear from more people first, because that's a good point, but there are other things going on with the dynamics too. Anyone else?
Well, I mean, I'm not an expert on anything, but I mean, they have a basic rhythm that they sing, the Ketchuk dancing. So you have a group of men chorusing who's just doing the rhythmic percussion part, and then you have the other voices coming in on top of it, forming like a melodic line.
Yeah, so you're already in another dimension. You're already more sophisticated. I'm trying to I'm bringing it down to the acoustic level. Okay. You're already on no, this is good, Diana, because you're already at the next level we're going to jump to, which is the musical.
Sorry.
But I thought it would be, no, don't apologize. I thought it would be just interesting to take a piece that's kind of out of most of our cultural knowledge, and
Yeah.
just to focus on these things. So I'm first just wanted to focus on acoustic elements. Is there anything else about the dynamics, about the loudness and softness?
No variations at all.
Say again?
There were no variations at all.
No variations.
I think there were lots.
Yeah, someone else? Shireen? Did you say?
I thought it was very multi-level all at the same time. So I would say the ostinato was kind of medium loud to medium soft, somewhere in a range between that. And then sometimes the, the male voices, I would say, were pretty much forte, even maybe fortissimo. And then also woven in were some very almost pianissimo women voices. And all of this going on, I found I had to listen really, really carefully to the pianissimo. I was unexpected to have it be that soft.
Did you
and yeah, a lot going on.
Containers?
Yeah, what happened at the, did you guys all hear what happened near the end of the excerpt I picked, dynamically?
Yeah, run them in.
Well, this rhythm thing kept happening, right? But there was a soft,
Right. Right. There's an actual, there's a melody going on there, which we'll talk about in the next dimension. But what was the dynamic of that compared to what we heard? Louder or softer?
Softer.
Okay. Softer, right? This is what I'd like to do again, because this is the thing I've always found the key to loving music is hearing it over and over, because the music doesn't change, but our perception changes. So let me play. I'm going to be playing this a lot of times. You're going to get to know it very well, but each time we're going to be focusing on a different layer. So let's just do one more time, just with dynamics. But already, as I'm doing dynamics, I want you to also start now to think of register, because register is the next thing I'm going to ask. I'll mute everyone while I'm playing this. Okay, it's a good excerpt to talk about all this stuff. I'm going to unmute you all. So now, are you hearing anything differently now in terms of loudness and softness?
Oh, yeah.
Richard?
Yeah, for sure. I didn't hear it at all before.
What did you notice now?
I kept hearing before just the scraping back and forth of whatever they're doing. And now the voices start coming in.
Okay, good. Okay, what about just loudness and softness? Because we're still staying with dynamics. What do you guys notice about it?
I noticed that, I was more attuned the second time, although this is the kind of music I like, but
we're not saying that though.
I could appreciate the loudness once I heard the softness. Contrast seemed more palatable once it moved to, I don't know what I'm talking about, but once the contrast from loud to soft.
So what did we hear in terms of just dynamics?
It seemed like it started loud, hit a long, quieter section, and then it sort of became loud again, then with the woman's voice on top, the very nasal woman's voice on top. So it seemed like it maybe had like 3 sections, you know, a loud section, a long, softer middle section, and then a louder section toward the end of the excerpt.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So you can talk about the dynamics in 2 ways. One, in just the way it's going, just the way the texture is proceeding, right? That it started super loud, got very soft, right, for a long, long time, then got very loud again and soft. So there, it seemed to be that loud thing was almost like a, you know, almost like a cadence marker that, you know, we're beginning something. You know, or maybe it's like a chorus, or we know that's already more sophisticated. We're talking about that's a formal element, but the dynamics were very noticeable the second time, right? As you heard it, it was very clear. The other way you could talk about dynamics is vertically, right? The way you could hear that there were different levels of loudness and softness. The back and forth hiccup going on with the with the male chorus was very, very quiet, right? And then possibly even quieter than that, you had a higher, you had a woman singing, perhaps, or maybe a woman, I don't know. How many of you heard there's actually another character? Did you notice the other character singing?
Sounds like
there's a lower character, a lower male voice, solo male voice singing. And
Not that much lower.
It's sort of the monkey god.
Huh. Yeah, all these different characters. It's very operatic. And you pick this up the more you do it. Yeah.
It's not that much lower, right? I mean, the man is going, oh, and in this range, the woman is only, oh, so.
No, he's actually pretty guttural. He's like, you know, there's a much lower. Well, this gets to the next. Okay, so Noam, you got to the next thing I want to discuss, which I think the next thing you notice after loudness, softness is register, high and low. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so how would you describe the high and low of this piece? Yeah, I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot. I just thought we could be like a hive mind together, putting this stuff together. And I think this will help you to hear it in a different way than you might have otherwise, without really doing anything technical.
Well, I think it explored the extremes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's good, right?
Yeah. So the opening, would you say the opening with the male chorus is high or low?
Low.
Yeah, it's more middle and low, maybe. And then we have the solo. We have the solo high voice, right? So you start to notice that a lot. Without knowing anything about the music, you start to get a sense of how it's wrought, how it's put together, just by the way it changes register.
Call it monkey something. What is it? What is it?
It's the Balinese monkey chant.
So are we supposed to be listening to monkeys?
No,
and these are human interpretations of what the monkey sounds like?
Monkey god. You want a picture? I'll find you a picture.
Yeah, this is a traditional Balinese opera, and they do this with literally hundreds or thousands sometimes of people doing this together. Any of you guys ever saw, I thought it was kind of Skotsky or whatever, one of those Philip Glass nature documentaries? They actually have a performance of the monkey dance. You can see. I picked it though because I don't want to talk about what its cultural roots. I wanted to imagine how can we approach something if we don't know its cultural roots, if we don't have the liner notes and everything. Because one of the things we have to do as listeners, and I tell you, the problem of being alive now is we're worldwide and 1 inch deep. We're expected to be able to listen to everything, and yet there's no way that we can have the background to be able to, understand Appalachian fiddling as deeply as we might understand, Baroque opera as deeply as we understand set theory. It's impossible to know all of that. So it would be helpful if we had some kind of simple universal vocabulary for getting our ears into things. And so that's what I'm kind of presenting to you with this, and just go with me for a little bit. So we talked now about dynamics, and we talked about register. The next thing we want to talk about is articulation. Articulation has to do with the attack, the way a musical or any kind of sound is attacked, whether it's long or short or anything in between. And so, how might we discuss the articulation of the monkey dance?
Screeching.
Screeching. That's screeching is getting into a timbre. That's more the color, which is the last thing we're going to do. So that's a really great description. But I'm thinking,
Thank you.
how does it seem like it's something that it's more melodic, or is it percussive? In other words, it's something that's very staccato and short, or is it something that's longer?
It's percussive for sure. No?
It's percussive, but it's so short. The sort of attacks are so short that it almost feels like a straight line.
Uh-huh.
And then you have this sort of sustained wailing, screeching, whatever, that is another different kind of thing. That's
Right. So when there's actually when we hear this upper voice, that is not a percussive sound, right? That's much more a linear sound, which, if when we get to the next dimension, that would definitely be a melody, right? Which is like a continuous succession of pitches and everything. Let's listen to just a little bit of it now, and just in terms of its articulation and its timbre, its color, and then we'll talk about that. That's already so much information in terms of articulation and timbre to my ear. What are you guys able to hear about articulation and timbre with that?
It's like somebody's shaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a shaking quality to it. Could you hear that there's lots of different articulations?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
quiet and slower and little.
There's these explosive sounds,
Yeah.
explosive short ones, and then there's gentler explosive. There's one, and then the boom, 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 boom. That's a gentler sound. It's not quite as short. It's medium short, right? And then when we have the well, let's say a woman's voice. I don't know if it's a woman's voice, but a higher voice. That then has a completely different articulation, right? That's legato, what we call legato, or connected. Being able to hear these differences starts to give you a sense of the music without technical knowledge. I remember an anecdote I heard that really struck me. I think there's a particular worm that is so populous on the planet Earth that I think I remember hearing a scientist say that if the entire planet Earth was instantly disintegrated and all that remained were the fossils from these worms, I think they were the flatworms, you could actually see the continents of the of the planet. In other words, there's just so much mass they have, these worms, that you would actually be able to make out, even if the planet wasn't there, kind of the structure of the planet. And that's in a certain way what we're trying to do, taking this apart. What would you say about the timbre, the color? We had a really great adjective, screeching. Does that describe the whole color of this excerpt, or are there other colors you could hear?
I hear dissonance.
Uh-huh. What does that mean?
Definitely vocal color.
Vocal color. So we heard the sound of vocal, meaning, well, everything was vocal, we heard, right?
I actually wasn't sure whether there was some sort of percussion instrument, if that was like a vocal percussion or if they actually were hitting on something.
That's my feeling whenever I hear Bobby McFerrin sing.
Right.
It always sounds like instruments. Yeah. That's exactly right. These are voices. It's all voices, and yet clearly it's voices that are creating what we would call instrumental sounds, right? Instrumental sounds. You can hear all kinds of drums, right? What are some of the colors you hear in the voices?
So there are no instruments at all?
No instruments.
Wow.
Isn't that remarkable?
To me, what I hear first and foremost is the rhythmic. I mean, it makes me, beat. It makes me, my toes tap and all that.
Uh-huh.
To me, it's totally rhythmic.
Yes, that's the next level. We haven't gotten there yet, but that's where we're going. I'm just trying to talk about color right now, so hold on to your sophistication. And
I would say Since
Here's
you
the
just
picture.
said those were voices, and I thought it was some kind of drum, that there's kind of a wooden
I thought it was like a
quality.
scraping noise or something.
Scraping, yeah, scraping. How many of you heard bells? I heard kind of bell sounds.
Bells.
Bells on the feet.
Things that are, I noticed bells.
Dancing bells.
Can
Yeah.
when I play it this time, you'll hear the lower male voice that's kind of growling. So I guess the point I'm trying to bring up is that as you listen to this more, just thinking about color, you'll notice that it's not one color. One of the things that gives this piece such a kind of gripping, quality to me is that it has a lot of different colors, even though it's all voices. Let's listen again, just in terms of color. Yeah, she kind of sounds like an oboe, doesn't she? On top, or the higher voice almost has an oboe quality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, I don't, it doesn't matter what words we use, but we're Westerners, we listen to orchestra music. The other voice to me has a kind of a bassoony quality to it, even though, as Noam pointed out, it's not really necessarily, it's both low and high, but it has a gristle to it. You find these kinds of words, just like you find words for spices. Like I'm just discovering in cooking now the wonders of coriander. You like that, Elaine? It's good.
I don't know the language of music, but I hear this beat in the background.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I think it helps to change. The emotion changes as the sound goes up and down, but the beat is constant to me.
Yes. So you are now taking us to the second dimension that I think in second dimension for noticing music, and that oops, I'm sorry, this is the acoustic ones. Let's see, are you able to see the music elements behind this? Are you able to see musical elements?
Yes, I see musical elements.
So this is kind of how we hear, put how we hear in music, how we hear music. So the other is just, you can apply the other four to any sound you hear, right? Any sound you hear has dynamics, register, articulation, and color. But when we hear sound in a particular organization that we think of as music, then we start to talk on another order, and that order is rhythm, texture, melody, and harmony. And I think, for me at least, I hear them in that order. And so I think it was Gloria who was saying, that you just kept talking about the rhythm. That is the most primordial musical element we notice all the time. We notice rhythm if it's there, and we notice rhythm if it isn't there too. But rhythm is very important. So like you said, noticing something that has a beat. And rhythm is a complicated concept. The way music unfolds in time itself is complex. In fact, just spelling the friggin' word is probably, I think it's taken me years to learn how to spell the word. I think it's the most difficult word to spell in the English language for me.
Rhythm?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Noam. I don't have your ability. I always move the consonants the wrong way. It just doesn't seem like it should be a word.
Oh, sure, but there are even worse examples, like arrhythmia.
Yeah. I'm sure there are, but this is a word I use all the time. The other words, if you would like me to, I might as well embarrass myself completely. I remember I did an entire CD-ROM, a very advanced CD-ROM on Richard Strauss's tone poems, and only discovered in writing that my entire life I had spelled the word tremolo incorrectly. So it's amazing how you can live with error takes a long time to be corrected. But getting back to rhythm. So how would we talk about the rhythm in the monkey dance?
Pervasive.
Okay, pervasive. Okay, meaning it's constant. And if we wanted to use jargon, we could use the Italian word ostinato, but we don't have to do that. Constant is fine.
Ostinato is from obstinate, right?
Yes, from obstinate, right? Yeah, right. Thanks, from obstinate. What else about it?
It's shocking to me how regular it is.
Regular?
It's mechanical.
One of the other things, it's very good. It's mechanical. It almost sounds, it sounds like a machine in a certain way. The other thing is, it's, you know, I guess we have to, without using jargon, it moves quickly, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the underlying rhythm moves quickly. Ticka, 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 ticka. You don't need to know this, but the most amazing thing about watching this, and Diana could tell us this, anyone who's seen it, is that what you see and what you hear, you can't believe it. Because as fast as that is, if you know, like 16th now, it's dugga, 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 dugga. Those are actually two groups of people sitting in large groups opposite each other, and they're alternating each one. One goes da, 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 but they're going dugga, 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 dugga. So the timing is so incredible at that speed. There's a physicality to it that is just so powerful. And so that becomes, like, you could say, the engine of the entire piece. And because it's so pervasive, it binds the work together. And that's one of the things we look at rhythm to do in so many of what we perceive to be musical sounds, is to bind the piece together. In fact, our culture is so prejudiced towards rhythm tracks that if you remove the rhythm track, they can't handle it. And I thought one of the funniest things that happened in our culture, I think it was about 15 years ago, you guys might know better, is that rock music got enamored of Gregorian chant. And so they would play Gregorian chant, but they would put a drum track under the Gregorian chant, because the whole beauty of Gregorian chant with this free chant, you know, not being bound in time, that there's no way, you know, 20th century mind could handle that. So we had to put a rhythmic track. You had to straitjacket it that way. I thought that's really funny the way we use it. Yeah, you guys all know what I'm talking about.
I'll tell you, I really resented a number of years ago, went to Temple Isaiah during one of the high holidays. My daughter wanted to explore the temple, and so we went. And while they were playing traditional Jewish melodies, there was a drum beat in the background, that soft drum beat.
Yeah.
And I really resented it so much. I almost walked out. I mean, that they were afraid that they were going to lose an audience by not having that beat.
Yes.
That constant beat. And it made me crazy.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's like
That was in a temple. This is Isaiah. It's not a little. You know, it's a stall. That's where I heard this.
I've not been subjected to that, but yeah, the incessant boom, 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 boom of modern, like, popular music is one of the biggest turnoffs to me.
You know, no, I couldn't agree with you more. I would say it makes us very much at odds with popular culture, because I think that's the semiotics of our popular culture, that pervasive mechanical beat. I mean, in the monkey chant, it wouldn't be considered good pop music, because it keeps changing. It changes dynamics and everything. But a kind of mechanical, non-changing beat, which of course is hip hop and rap, is so important to that, whether it's electronic or whatever. It's very important to the aesthetic of our time. And it's a very, part of it is that we live in a time with compression, right? Where, because, you know, the music is engineered to be able to be heard in a car, to go over road noise and everything, that, you know, all the dynamics are compressed so that music is always playing at a constant level. Or we see that sometimes negatively if you watch television and the commercials seem so much louder. They're actually not louder, but we perceive them as louder, because what they do is they compress all the sound so that it's always at the same level. It doesn't have any lows and highs, and so it's always pushing the extremes. And so that's kind of a world we live in. And so much for us in classical music is is a very different aesthetic. I always tell people, if you're going to listen to Mahler, do not listen to Mahler in the car or you'll have an accident. Because Mahler, you know, you'll crank up that volume while he's in triple P, and then boom, you know, you're dead. So, you know, you have to make sure that you're actually not driving while you're listening to Mahler.
Or shaving. I had a roommate, I was listening to Mahler Third Symphony, and there's a big crescendo in, I get like the scherzo post-horn movement. There's a huge unexpected fortissimo, but it had been going on very quietly, and he came out and said, I just cut my face because of that music.
Mahler is bloody. It's a bloody affair. Bloody affair. That is so true. Just like I tell people, do not try to have a romantic dinner listening to Beethoven, because Beethoven grabs you by the throat. You know, he does not want anyone else's your attention anywhere else other than in his music. And one way he does that leads us to the next thing I want to talk about, which is texture. Texture for us listeners is so important, being able to hear how texture changes, because even if we know nothing about the musical language, and I'm talking about whether we're listening to experimental music or pop music or just world music, things that we don't know about, just following the changes of texture are a way to keep yourself engrossed, because a well-wrought piece of music it is constantly changing its texture. In the monkey dance, you know, think about the difference of texture. You start with this back and forth, and then it gets quiet. But it's not just that it gets quiet, the texture changes, because very softly they're going da 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 da, but then if you listen, there's a boom 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 boom. That's what I call the bells. Boom 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 boom. So that's a very different textural sound. Then you've got the high voice going over that, whatever, and that creates a completely different, a third different texture. And then the growly guy, as I call it, underneath that, you know, so now that creates a fourth texture. Well, you know, you can hear this without knowing what it means, what the story is about, what it's trying to do, and you can follow these changes and be engrossed just in textural changes, because a lot of information in music is conveyed just with texture alone. And in fact, as Mark and Noam know, you know, when we listen to contemporary music, you know, that's one of the things we have to hold on to as listeners, because unless you spent 2 years studying, you know, with, you know, particular person's language, you really don't understand the language, but you can pick up on its textural elements and to see those changes. You know, Stravinsky, for instance, if you're having a hard time with any passage of Stravinsky, you know, the texture is a huge clue into the emotion and to the narrative of the music. So I think texture in this piece is really important. Melody, I think, is the third thing you hear, and melody is actually, you know, the melodic narrative which we follow in music. It seems like that's the first thing we notice, but for me, I really find that rhythm and texture are actually what give us a clue in first, and then we will have this laser focus on melody, and the melody will seem to convey the whole piece. But this is just a personal observation of mine, is that when people are recalling melodies and singing melodies, in their mind, they're hearing the rhythm and the texture and the harmony too. And I noticed that, someone getting a call. I've noticed this, you know, even when I see little kids humming melodies, or anyone humming a melody. Someone sent me a really cute thing of a 3-year-old singing this melody. And I was so aware that in the child's ear, that child was hearing all the rhythm and the texture, because just listening to the child do the melody alone, there wasn't much to it, but I could tell that the melody is kind of, to me, almost a mnemonic for the entire enchilada, for all the rhythm, texture, melody, and harmony. Melody is kind of a fantastic memory device. And I'm going to play, well, I'm running, God, this discussion is getting so interesting. I think we may have to continue it. Are you enjoying this, by the way?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to put in one thing about the rhythm.
Yes.
one time I veered off of my classical path and took a jazz improv class at Berkeley,
Yeah.
and jazz piano, and it was really a stretch for me. But my assignment was to, after getting the piece going with the harmonies and things, was to gradually change off of the melody, using different modes and things, but keep the rhythm the same.
Yeah.
And that as long as you keep the rhythm the same, people will go with you and know that it's the same piece. And actually trying to do that and experiencing that was the biggest convincer that I had, that the rhythm is the strongest tie.
Yeah.
And also a fun game when I was teaching children was just to give them the rhythm of a piece and have them guess. And they can do it.
Yeah.
If it's something they know,
right.
pretty quick.
One thing I was almost going to be embarrassed because it may be putting Western strictures on this freer music, but it almost seemed that they were like bar lines, because the person, maybe you were calling the bell person, was going boop da 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 boop da 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 boop da 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 or something like that. So it was almost like it was demarcated, and then the high voice was going across the bar lines very freely, and I wasn't sure if I was supposed to hear it that way, but the sort of vocal interest areas that weren't the percussion ones were a lot freer than the ostinato with the little boops.
I think that's a beautiful observation to make, because this is what makes listening so wonderful, is that you're noticing that it's irony, there's irony. It's not one thing, you're right. So the idea of hearing something that seems very controlled and yet something that's very free over it. I think that let's get rid of the idea of what you're supposed to hear or not. I don't even know what that means, but it's certainly something that I think we're all perceiving. And I think that you make a really good point about that. That the freedom, one being free, one being kind of shackled. That's definitely a rhythmic, that's a rhythmic perception. That's really important. And just like it's important to be able to hear the textural perception. And then the one that we didn't talk about, because this is the most difficult of all of them, of course, and it's the one that we musicians, at least for me, and I know Noam for sure, we spend most of our time thinking about, but it isn't, with listeners, harmony is the most difficult thing. Harmony, I think, is one of the most difficult things of perception. Now, harmony can be easy in most world cultures because, like, for instance, this monkey dance, harmony is usually just a single vertical sound that doesn't change. Like Noam and I were talking about earlier today, Indian music, which will have, as a drone, and then over, the sitar will play a very free melody over this drone. But in Western music, certainly starting actually from the 12th century, the thing that made our music so distinctive was that these vertical sounds would just keep changing over time, in fact, sometimes very quickly. And the reason this is such a big deal is that Western music, for the 300 years we talk of tonal harmony, is organized around this guy, around the harmony. It's not organized for the most part about rhythm, texture, or melody. It's organized around the harmony. So this is why this is an epiphany for me, because I couldn't understand, like, how come when I go to a classical concert and they're playing a Beethoven symphony, why is it that people are just listening for the famous melody or the famous rhythm or the texture? It's because they're not aware of how harmony is controlling the way the story unfolds. And so, in a certain way, to hear Western music, I think more than any other music, you need to build your harmony muscles. You need to be able to understand, the difference between, or this. You need to be able to hear that difference, or to know if you need to know where you are in that cycle to know where the piece is going to go. And so, so I think these four elements in music, this is another order from listening to the acoustic, but you can apply this to all kinds of music. And what I'd like to do, I can see I'm getting too enthusiastic about this. We still have two more dimensions to cover. But let me play you a different piece, and let me have you guys tell me what you perceive in this piece in terms of the acoustic elements and the musical elements, in terms of dynamics, register, articulation, color, and then musical things, rhythm, texture, melody, and harmony. Because what you'll notice is any given piece of music, certain elements seem to be more a foreground than others. You know, like in certain, in certain things, the texture will be the thing that hits you the most. In others, it might be the dynamics, and others a rhythm, others the harmony. And so let me just, again, pick a piece that's like from world music that you might not know, so that you can not bring fewer prejudices to it. Let's listen to this one. Isn't that gorgeous? Not supposed to say like or not like, but there's a lot in that. So anyone, just which of those 8 elements, if any of them, strike you in this piece?
I think for me, it's the timbre.
Excellent.
It is so sort of sustained and drawn out, but it puts me into a whole different frame of mind. I cannot be the person I normally am. I just have to give in to it.
That's beautiful. I happen to agree. I think the timbre is just so exotic. And so then it makes me think, like, how could you describe that timbre? You know, how would you describe it to to someone who hasn't heard the piece? It's hard. I know it's hard. And so it's not like a test. It's more like just a question. Like, how would you describe it?
So when you say timbre, you're referring to the entire experience, or because what haunted me, to me, it's haunting. And it was his voice was just phenomenal. But I don't know what the name of that is. You know, is that the timbre?
Well, the timbre is the color of the sound. It can be that, but the voice, might be the color of the way you could describe his voice. Like some people have a smoky voice, some people have a shrill voice, there's ways of describing it that way. But you also it actually might have been the melody that was haunting for you. Because the melody is a microtonal melody, meaning it isn't based on our Western tune system, but there's a certain, it's a chant, right? It has a chant quality, and it's a very meditative sound to it. And so I think those are the things. The timbre, though, has to do with the kind of colors of the sounds. Like, for instance, did you hear there were sounds that were like sustained wind sounds, like an organ sound going on, but that was contrasted with a pluck sound that was very short.
Very much so.
Right? And then then there was this flute sound, right? The flute sounds, all these different colors. Let's play it just a little bit. Let's play it again, because I always feel it's important to hear things twice. I learned that, by the way, Noam, from Peter Maxwell Davies. I don't know if you were there when the 1 week or two he was at Harvard, but
I don't remember.
he said something that I never forgot. He was talking about Mozart, and he was talking about repetition. And he said, well, you know, the reason Mozart repeats things, it's like, that's the reason we have two eyes. And he says, you know why we have two eyes? Because one eye is to see things, and the other eye, because we're hunters, we need the other eye to fix it. So you look once, then you have the other eye that fixes it, and then we can do it. So Mozart is fixing it. I just love that explanation. It was so, that was actually the one thing I really got from him. So let's listen to this again.
You heard Brahms' line about repeats, right?
No, tell me.
Well, he was conducting his own symphony. I think it was possibly a second, and he had the orchestra not take the repeat. So somebody asked him, why aren't you taking the repeat that you wrote yourself? He said, by now everybody knows the piece.
Oh, he said they don't need to hear it. They already have it in their ear. Yeah. I have very strong feelings about that, depending on the piece. And I'm sure all musicians do. I have a real, my peccadillo is the Beethoven Pastoral Symphony. So many recordings don't take the repeat. And I feel the repeat of the first movement is actually one of the most expressive moments of the entire symphony. So I always feel like if they don't take that repeat, you know, that when it goes, I need that to fall back instead of going. That goes forward, but I always love that falling back. It's my favorite serene moment of the symphony, but most of the so many recordings don't have it. Okay, that was a good tangent. Let's, I'm supposed to be done now. So let's listen with our second ear to the Gaga Coup one more time, and then I'll listen to whatever comments you have. I'm having fun at least.
Wait, she hasn't even left.
Love it.
There's a lot in that, right? A lot in that.
Sure.
So let me just, with your permission, I would like to continue this subject next week to finish it. Would that be all right?
Yes.
Okay, let me do that. And then I guess what I just wanted to finish saying, what I'm trying to do, like I said to you at the beginning, let's not talk about whether we like something or not like it, but then how do we start to talk about music in a way that isn't filled with jargon that can actually communicate something? So I just want you to think about this. That's what I'm trying to do. Can we start to talk about things in terms of loudness and softness, in terms of high and low? You see, I'm building a vocabulary that could be applied to any kind of music we want to listen to. And so anyway, that was the idea. I want to thank you guys for joining me. And you're a great group. Why don't you all say goodbye to each other, and I'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks, Russell.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, Russell.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Russell.
Russell. It was great as always.
Good. I'm so
See
glad
you.
you enjoyed. I'm going to be giving you some information about a particular series that I want to initiate. You know, it'd be a paid series, and I'll talk with some of you privately about how I can go about that. Okay. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next week.
West Coast.
Yeah. What? Yeah.
So are most of you on the West Coast?
Different places.
I am.
Mark and Noam are in Boston.
Boston.
Hello. Well, Cambridge, but yes.
Excuse me. That's right.
So Russell, I'll just say one thing, that when you talk about harmony, we talk about harmonic rhythm. When you're trained as a musician, that's a big element. And so, but in the Gaga Coup piece, when the instruments came in, I thought that was the tonic, you know, but it was a whole step above. But because of the texture and the timbre, I thought, oh, that's the home harmony. But it wasn't, and then it went back down. And so the really special moments. Anyway, but this is so ambitious, so I really look forward to the sequel.
Yeah, we're just trying to have a good time as we all sit here in isolation. Okay, it's a real pleasure to be with all of you. I'll see you next week. Priscilla, I'm glad you got on this time. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.